My driving force is creating freedom of time, freedom of finances, freedom of focus, and not just for myself, but for others as well. I really love helping. I've been a teacher, and so I'm passionate about helping people scale their investments and simplify their lives through systems, delegation, and figuring out how to run it like a business.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why? Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Adrienne Green. Adrienne is an entrepreneur and real estate investor who achieved financial freedom by building a profitable real estate portfolio and launching Workergenix, a virtual staffing agency for entrepreneurs. So, Adrienne, like I mentioned, I don't like to sort of go in. There's lots of good stuff in your bio, but I really want to let people hear your story in your words. So first, thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for taking out the time. I appreciate having you on.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited to share.
Awesome. So yeah, let's start there. Let's start. Just give us your background. Tell us a bit about yourself, and then we'll dive in from there.
Sure. So I think I had a pretty typical American upbringing, and I ended up going to USC in Los Angeles for college. I studied business and finance there, again, thinking of the very typical American corporate route. And I worked in finance for like a year before I realized that I really didn't like that corporate setting, that it kind of made me feel like a rat in a cage. And so I went back and got my teaching credential because I realized early on that what really motivates me is helping other people. And in that corporate setting, I just wasn't doing that. So I went back and got my teaching credential and used what I knew about finance and numbers. And I taught high school math actually for a number of years. And then how I got into real estate was I was married at the time. My husband and I wanted to start a family, and I just really didn't want to leave this child that I wanted to have to go be with other children uh, every day. And so I was like, well, how can I do something that allows me that freedom to not do that, right? To be entrepreneurial. And that started with, I had a hobby farm. So any kind of farm stuff that was on a small scale we did. And then that's how I got into real estate investing as well. My husband and I had bought what we thought was our dream house. It was much bigger than we needed for just the two of us. And I realized after several months we'd never gone in the basement. And so we built out a kitchen area where it was already kind of plumbed for a wet bar and started renting out the basement with house hacking. And so that is what got me into real estate and kind of got me hooked, realizing how great real estate investing can be. The money I made from that rental is the easiest money I made. And that developed. I ended up buying other long-term rentals. Eventually, I became a real estate agent to my thought was originally for my own investments, but it quickly became, working with others. I expanded my portfolio into short-term rentals, kind of on a whim, honestly, on a trip to Myrtle Beach. Realized that the numbers there worked and bought a place. And then in 2020, I actually moved. I was in Northern Virginia at the time, outside of DC, and moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, for a lifestyle, quality of life, and also because it was a great market for real estate investing. Completely restarted my real estate agent business in a new market, focusing on working with real estate investors, helping people from across the nation and really even across the world to invest in Chattanooga, all the while also growing my own investing portfolio. In 2023, I sold that real estate team and now I have a virtual assistant business, like you mentioned, which is in part because I used virtual assistants on my real estate team. That's what started that whole business. So it's all really come from real estate. And so I have my investment portfolio, virtual staffing business. And now, since for about a year now, I've traveled the world full time with my family. It's myself and my husband, and we have three children, ages 9, 7, and 4 currently. And I manage my portfolio and the business all remotely.
Wow. That's there's so much about this that's like what makes real estate great, like in just within your story. The um and I think like even just kind of the simple way that you started by renting out your basement, like realizing there was an opportunity in your own home. People like to call it house hacking. That's fine. Put a name on it. But ultimately, like you took space that you weren't using and decided to have it, generate income for you. And so, I think that the point that I'm getting at there is that a lot of times people think, hey, you need to have a lot of money or you need to have some specific job or whatever to get into real estate. But I don't think that people think that teachers make a lot of money. And so I think that that's a kind of a good example of just like taking advantage of what was there for you to get started, and then kind of recognize that opportunity and keep going from there. um,
Mhm.
when you decided to get to become a real estate agent, you said it started out as being for your own rentals. Tell me a little bit about sort of what that was like for you in the beginning, that transition, kind of how that all happened.
That's a great question because I feel like so many real estate investors think about becoming an agent, or they're like, oh, I want to be an agent. And I know that for myself, and I think for a lot of other people, I didn't realize what it entailed when I made that decision. Now, it ended up working out really well for me because I was able to succeed as an agent and I was able to create and build this team that I sold. And yet, I also see a lot of real estate investors where that isn't the case. And so, some things that I didn't think about when I got started, I was originally, and what happened, the impetus was, I wanted real estate professional status. That was going to be advantageous and that was easier to get if I, became a real estate agent. And then we actually lost out on a deal and thought that part of that was because of the agent we were working with. And so uh, that was kind of the impetus. And I was like, well, let's not have that happen again. I can just get my real estate license, not have to wait for anyone else to open doors, not have to like do that. I can just handle it all myself. What I didn't think about, I think, were several factors. And these factors kind of played into why I decided to expand and help other people, in addition to the fact that, like I've said, I love helping other people, and that's one of my primary motivators. But it takes there's a lot of bureaucracy with getting a license. Now, if you are an experienced real estate investor, the testing and everything for the licensing, I thought was pretty easy. Now, some people get tripped up on the math. Obviously, I was fine with that with my background, and so there is that initial hoop of just the bureaucracy and the hassle of getting a license, and then you do have a lot of ongoing fees and memberships you have to be a part of. Like in, I'd say 98% of the nation, you've got to be a member of the Realtor Association. And so, all these things add up of doing your CEs, having the license, being a part of a brokerage, which, you
Mhm.
have to do. You cannot just be on your own. You have to be a part of a brokerage. Typically, you for minimum of 3 years, and insurance and everything that goes into it. And what you learn in your course is in no way related to actually being an agent. So once you become an agent and you have that license, you still do not know how to complete a contract. You still do not know how to do anything, right? You don't even know how to open the lockbox and get in the house, how to have the account to do that or anything. And so there is a lot of information there. And what it's a lot of tribal knowledge as well, which if you're somebody like me who comes from a very like I'm going to Google it, I'm going to figure it all out online, like you can't always, and it's different state to
Yeah.
state or even region to region. And so um, yeah, there was a lot more to it than I realized. And so I like to make sure that investors know all about that. And then another aspect of it is there's a lot more liability as an investor doing your own transactions if you're also a real estate agent. If you have that license, you're held to a higher standard in terms of what you're supposed to disclose and how you handle yourself. So especially on the sales side of things, I think it doesn't come into play so much on the buy side. On the sales side, it does. And so those are all just things I think that if a real estate investor is thinking about becoming an agent, that they may want to know and just make sure that they're know all the facts before they make the decision, so they know it's the right decision for them.
Yeah, I do think that's a really great point because there is so much more to it than, oh, I just take that course and take the test and now I can do everything an agent can do. There's really a lot more behind the scenes. This is a question I think that comes up often, and you mentioned that people sometimes think like you did. I'm just going to get my license so I can maybe get around some of the things that I've dealt with as a real estate investor. So the question that comes up is should you or do you need your real estate license to be a real estate investor? And now you're in a unique perspective because you actually did it. What would you tell people, I guess, as far as an answer to that question?
You know what? I think that for most real estate investors, the answer is no. There are very few where I feel like it's really worth it for them. One specific example where I think that it's totally worth it is a syndicator that I know who's doing huge multifamily transactions. They've purchased or transacted over, I mean, they're all just doing purchases for their own syndications, but they've purchased, I think, like 180 million in transactions. Like, that's a lot of commission. That's worth it, right? When they're doing it on that level, and they're doing mostly buy side because they are buy and hold investors. And so they don't
Mhm.
have that extra liability of those extra standards that they're held to on the sell side. That's a situation where I think it is worth it. I think for most investors, you're going to find that it just adds a lot of tasks that are not your top 20%. That's what I would say.
That's a fascinating perspective on that. I would not have even considered that, who's someone who's syndicating should go out and get their commercial brokerage license. But yeah, from the commission side of things, that's going to be a big swing in revenue generated on those transactions. So that's actually a great idea and something I hadn't really considered. Um, so with that kind of in mind, in terms of whether or not you should, if we were to say the answer is most of the time not, you then went on to sort of help other real estate investors as a broker. And I think ultimately that's what I've heard from a lot of people, and you can tell me if you agree, but is that, like, what you really need, you don't necessarily need to get the license yourself, but you need to find someone who is an investor friendly agent, and knows kind of, because it's a different thing, right? It's a different product that you're looking for as an investor
Mm-hmm.
versus someone who's going out to buy their first time primary residence, and they're just
Right.
excited and want the house that's just got the things that they like, and that's not necessarily what an investor is looking for when they're out there shopping for real estate. So um, I think it's a nice position to be in as a real estate broker, and also someone who's investor, finding ways to connect with that person who has that knowledge. You said that in Tennessee you did a lot of that in Chattanooga. How how is that different? How is that different from the broker side of things? How is that? I know as an investor or someone buying my family home, it looks different. But how is that different? Kind of on the broker side from when you're helping a client.
Right. Well, and so one of the things I think is there are a lot of investor friendly real estate agents out there in the markets that are traditionally good for real estate investing. So that was one thing. If you're someone who lives in, expensive markets like California or Seattle, or like where I was in Northern Virginia, where you're really not going to cash flow. Maybe you have an appreciation play, but you're not going to, it can be more difficult to find an investor friendly agent. I know that's what I felt in Northern Virginia and part of why I got my license. The thing is, if you go to a market like, just last week, I was helping a past client find an investor friendly realtor in Kansas City. And there were several great options, right? So that's one thing is if you don't feel like there's investor friendly markets in your local market, maybe it's because it's not a great investing market. When you go to these investor friendly markets, you are going to find investor friendly realtors. And what that looks like what I did for my clients and what I would recommend, an investor look for is first, I had a network of the people that they needed. And that's part of why also I say, there's benefit of working with an investor friendly agent versus getting your own license. Is like my full-time job was doing real estate, and it was networking with property managers, it was networking with contractors, it was going to like the landlord luncheon that happened every month and seeing the other agents who were there and seeing the investors who were there and making those connections and finding out about the off-market deals. So they should be have a network that they can use for you, right? And they should know what the investor landscape looks like in that market, what neighborhoods or communities are good for what kinds of investing, right? Some markets, you're all one kind of investing, but some markets are different, right? Like some markets you can do flips and you can do burrs and you can do buy and ready, buy and hold, and single family and multifamily. Like in Chattanooga, where I was, less than 10% of our inventory was multifamily. And so we were a very heavy single family market. And so when people came to me and they were like, I only want multifamily, I really want a sixplex or bigger, I'm like, well, here's what we can offer, here's what we can look for, and yet realize that there's only a few sixplexes or more that come on the market in a year, right?
Mhm.
So that's some of the advantage of what I think a local real estate agent who's focusing on investors can look for. They can have that team, they can have that local market knowledge. And if somebody's listening and they're an agent who wants to focus on investors, that's what I would say is a couple things that you want to build up. Know what A, B, and C class are. Know which areas in your market are that. Know what typical rent returns are. Like befriend the property managers and just hear their stories.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great idea. Uh, so you built this brokerage in Chattanooga, you sold it, and then started. Well, maybe they overlapped, but now you have the VA business. So
Mhm.
what? How did that come to be? What? And I
Right,
guess not only how did it come to be, but what do you do now? Like, what is that? What is your focus within that
right.
business?
So how it came to be was a bit of a it's kind of funny. So my husband reads the 4 Hour Work Week, right? And he's like, "Oh my goodness, virtual assistants can do all this stuff for you." And I totally scoffed and dismissed it. I might have even like full on guffawed out loud. I was like, "No, no, I'm not." And then when I was still in Northern Virginia for a short period of time, I joined a real estate team there. And they had some virtual assistants who were helping with things. And there were a couple like really great transformational lessons I got from being on this team. One was, in the real estate space, I think both for agents and for investors, we tend to be one man bands, right? Jack of all trades. We're
Yeah.
going to do everything
Yep.
ourselves, right? And I saw on this team when they took a very traditionally like one man band job, like real estate or being a real estate agent, and they really allowed people to differentiate and to specify and to have something that they did really well. So like we had a listing coordinator, right? We had a staging specialist. We had all these people so that then as a real estate agent, I could focus on my top 20% jobs as a real estate agent. I didn't have to do all the other operational pieces that were related. I could just
Hmm.
do my top 20% tasks. And so that was something that I've taken into my real estate agent business after that in Chattanooga. It was a key reason that I was able to grow. And part of that differentiation or specificity with roles was using virtual assistants. And so we had virtual assistants who would prep offers, right? Who would handle a lot of the paperwork and things like that. So when I moved to Chattanooga and I started my own team, it was really January 2021 when I had all my licensing in place and I was, hanging my shingle and ready to help clients. And it was February 2021, after I'd had one closing so far, that I brought on a full time virtual assistant because I knew that based on the sales price in Chattanooga, based on what my commission would be, and then how many deals, multiplying that out, how many deals I'd need to do to make what I needed to make, I knew that I'd have to be rocking and rolling and doing a lot of work. And like I had 3 young children, right? My kids at that time were like 6, 4, like 1, 3, and 5 actually. And so I knew that I could not do those bottom 80% operational tasks, that I needed a virtual assistant to do those so that I could stay in my top 20% and do the number of deals that I needed to do to make the money I needed to make. And I did not have some great system in place. I did not have all these SOPs that I could hand off to them. I did not. I had one like Google sheet that listed my contract to close steps, and then that was it. And so just every time I did that, my next contract to close, I made a video. I just screen shared, narrated, and walked through what I did. And then the virtual assistant wrote a procedure and they handled it every time after that. And that allowed me in 2021, between like February when they came on in August, to do so many transactions that even with the virtual assistant, I was working like crazy. And I went into my like brokerage and I said, I need to start a team. I need to get other agents to work with me because I have more business than my virtual assistant and I can handle. So that ended up growing a team of real estate agents and virtual assistants. That's all we ever had. And we did a lot of transactions. I think in the next year, 2022, we did like 130 transactions as a team. And the vast majority of those were with real estate investors. And so, in seeing how impactful virtual assistants were for my team and for my business, my husband and I started a virtual staffing company to help other entrepreneurs, other business owners, other real estate investors, or real estate agents do the same. Because it really is just, especially at that time, and I think continuing, it's so difficult to hire in the United States, right? It's difficult to just find people. That's what we were finding, is that a lot of people, they needed an admin, they needed an assistant, but they would have these job listings and they kept pumping up the price and no one would apply, or people would apply and not stick with it. And we're like, there's a whole world of people who have the skills to do this, right? Anything that's on the phone or on the computer, there are people all over the world who can do this. They've got college degrees, they can speak English, and they are clamoring to do these jobs for less than you're advertising right now. And so we really just look to meet that need, and we've created systems to meet that need. And so that is kind of a thing that's, again, it came very organically out of my business. And so we have that business. And then I also now work specifically to help real estate investors figure out how to bring a virtual assistant on. I have an online course and one-on-one help as well if real estate investors are looking to get that piece in place because they've reached the max of what they can do on their own and they really want to continue growing and scaling. That's where a virtual assistant can be a huge help.
Yeah, we've used some virtual assistants as well, and it really, it's really quite a game changer. And I think that the interesting thing to me is, as I've started to notice that, I guess it shouldn't be a surprise, but things are born out of need, right? So a lot of the concepts you just talked about, like focusing on your top 20%, getting other people to help you. There's some really good, you mentioned 4 Hour Workweek, like there's some really good books out there that are exactly for people trying to sort of solve these problems, like 4 Hour Workweek, Who Not How. I mean, there's just a lot of things that talk about these particular concepts. I think for two reasons, really. One is probably the main intended reason is that entrepreneurs tend to, as you said, like be the jack of all trades. I can do this. I'll work until my fingers bleed. I don't need sleep, that kind of thing. And then they come across a book that's like, it doesn't have to be like that. And they're very exciting to that. But then also there's, the book's called 4 Hour Workweek. And so people who don't necessarily want to work hard are like, I'll read this one. And so, you can kind of see, though, how this stuff applies very well in the entrepreneur world. I mentioned we have virtual assistants. They're phenomenal. I've never met them in person, but like I really like them. They're just people I really like working with, and they're just great to have on the team. You also kind of talked about how they played a role in your business. You sold that brokerage, and now are you sort of you're really focused on your real estate portfolio and the virtual assistant business, right? Or are you still involved as a broker in any way? I know you mentioned traveling full time, and I definitely want to talk about that next. But kind of how is your day structured now that
Right.
with what you've got going on?
Well, I will tell you, I work a lot more than 4 hours in a week. uh, After I sold that team, I did take a step back to really relax a bit and think about what I enjoyed. But the truth is, I love to help people. And if I'm just like hanging out with my kids all day, like, yes, I can help them, but like, it gets a little boring for me. I like to be somewhere where I can really make an impact. So, my husband is a CEO and he does the majority of our day-to-day operations for the Workergenix virtual staffing business. He's taken over that domain. So I help a lot with our real estate investing. I do oversee our virtual assistants who do that. We've got short-term rentals and long-term rentals, and some syndication, some passive stuff as well. So I oversee the virtual assistants with that, and then I really worked to help real estate investors now, to help them when they, those intermediate and advanced investors who feel like they've reached the end of what they can do on their own, and help them get the systems and the leverage in place with virtual assistants and with technology. Because so many real estate investors, they have great ideas and they get out there and they're so passionate and they do all this fun stuff, but then they're like, oh no, I didn't write down how I did that. I don't know how to do it again. Now, instead of it being a fun hobby, it's taking away time for my kids, right? I'm getting those calls from the short-term rental guests or the messages on Airbnb when I'm at my kid's soccer game, and now it's something that I don't like. And then they end up just selling the properties and walking away. I just actually saw in Chattanooga a client who we helped buy properties now has them listed, right? They couldn't handle it. They didn't know how to succeed with this and how to have the benefits without the drawbacks. And so they're just walking away from something that is so transformational in terms of your wealth and your life. And it's really sad. So that's what I try to do now, is help people with, I have one online course that helps helps real estate investors figure out how to hire a virtual assistant. It walks them through that. And then I have one-on-one support as well for people with whatever they need to help with those systems and processes to get in place so you can really run your investment portfolio like a business.
Which is exactly what you need to do, right? You mentioned the people that bought some properties, you helped them buy some properties, now they're selling them. I mean, that is ultimately, if you cannot figure out how to run it like a business and have people help you and kind of put all these systems in place, it's not fun. And it's going to be, there are going to be periods of pain while you're doing that, while you're putting those things into place. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that your kind of story and example is a perfect sort of vision of like what it can become. And it didn't happen in 6 weeks or a
Right.
year, or it takes a long time to get to that point. And so I think people getting into real estate investing, business, entrepreneurship in any way, like, you just need to understand that it is going to take a long time to get to that point where you might have that 4 hour work week, or you might have the whole team of VAs or whoever, kind of where you're just oversight. It takes time to get there, but it is doable. And you're now traveling full time, you said, which I think is entirely fascinating. And I that's what I want to talk about. I just want to kind of understand how that looks for you and your family. You've got 3 young
Right.
kids. Like, I we have 2 young kids, and sometimes traveling at all is very daunting. So doing that for kind of a full-time life sounds amazing. Almost like it's amazing in the sense that you can do it, right? Like, so many people are tied to a location. Like, being able to
Right.
be wherever you want, whenever you want, I think is kind of really, really an amazing space to be in. So tell us a bit about that. I just want to hear about it. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and Jason, I'm happy to pass along my tips to you and any listeners who are interested to what we've learned to do it well. So, first, it relates really well to what you were just saying, Jason, about how this doesn't happen overnight. So I have always loved traveling. My husband has always loved traveling. So even before we had this vision that someday we would take time and travel around the world with the family, but we really thought it would happen later. And of course, like anything with visioning, I think one big lesson is anything with visioning, when you focus on it, it ends up happening sooner than you think. But second, like you were saying, it doesn't happen overnight, and we did prepare for it. So even in, I think it was in 2023, I was traveling, and a lot of this was with the kids about 10% of the year. Some of that was work, but a lot of it was just we traveled during school breaks because my kids
Mhm.
were in school, and that prepared them and that taught them like just little things that if you don't travel, they don't know. Like in a hotel, the elevator, you're not having, unless you're living in apartment building or high rise condo, you're not dealing with an elevator to go to and from your housing every day, right? But by traveling a lot, my kids learned elevator etiquette because trust me, if they don't learn it, they're just like wild animals running in and out of the elevator and cutting people off, right? So they learned a lot because we traveled a lot before we were traveling full time. So that was one of the things is that we prepared them and taught them and were very intentional about learning opportunities and about here's the behavior and here's how we set up things for success. Now, when it comes to our full time travel, some other things that have helped a lot is first off, it's not like a vacation, right? It's not like a vacation where you're going to stay maybe a week at the most in one place. We do slow travel. It's really a good balance because we have 5 humans, right? We have a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that was one of the things we decided early on. It's like some people travel, they say, carry on only. We're like, you know what? If you look at objectively what the baggage fees are to check baggage when it's not included or things like that, that is less than we would pay to replace or buy the stuff that we typically need, let's say on a monthly basis. So we decided early on, we're not doing carry on only. We have 5 bags, a couple small, a couple like larger carry or checked bag size. And we bring the stuff that we typically are going to need in a given month. And so with that, we do slow travel because it is more work to get in and out of a place. So we typically are going to go to a city or a country for a month at a time. Sometimes we are going to see like, a special, sometimes we'll take time to actually do like sightseeing or like vacation travel. We'll travel quicker than that. But our general standard is we want to rent a place where we're going to go be for 4 weeks. You get the Airbnb discount, which is we often book through Airbnb. You get a long-term discount when you book for 4 weeks, and it's just easier for us to be like, we're going to be settled here for 4 weeks. We're going to see the sites while we're here, but we're also working. We're also doing homeschool. We're also just living our daily lives, right? And it's kind of fun when we're in a place long enough that like we find a restaurant we like and the people there start recognizing us and knowing our order, right? Things
Yeah.
like that can happen in a month where you really get like you feel like you get to fit in and feel the vibe of the place. So slow travel, typically a month at a time. We didn't stress about carry on only. And then the other thing I would say is, especially with kids, schooling. Even as a former high school teacher, like my kids are younger, and I had some stress about homeschooling them. I was like, how is this going to go? Like, I can teach high schoolers. They all know how to like read and write and all that. Like, but these guys, like, 2 of my kids knew how to read and write, but the third one, no. And, basic math and everything. I was stressed. But honestly, it has gone so much better than I anticipated. And I know that that's a fear for a lot of parents when they think about travel. And so I would just want to say, like, I had that fear. And the thing is, especially because of COVID, there's so many online options now
Yeah.
that handle a lot of that schooling for you and make it really easy. So there are fully accredited programs that you can put your kids in where it's not even like they're classified as homeschool. Then there are other homeschool programs you can put in if you want to be classified as homeschool. And that's the route we went because I didn't want to have to stick to any other time schedule, or like if we didn't have internet somewhere, it would be okay. And honestly, in hindsight, I think either path would have been fine for us. But we have an online program that they use that covers the bulk of their curriculum. Every kid has a tablet. They do that. We supplement with some other like flashcard apps for math and for words. They use Duolingo. We're really big on languages. So they have Duolingo where they are actually learning several different languages. And then we also have a Spanish tutor that we work with. One little case study, my 7-year-old's decided he's really into chess. So we've started watching chess videos on YouTube on I might even be on YouTube Kids. I don't remember if it's regular YouTube or YouTube Kids, but we're watching chess videos. And then we were applying it. But then my husband and I found we were spending way too much time playing chess with him. So we found him an app where he can again learn and then play chess against other people. So my 7-year-old right now is able to spend probably a couple hours a day learning and playing chess every day right now.
Wow.
Like he is getting so good. And that's not something that we would have done or had the opportunity to do if we had stayed in our, schools that we were in our lives that we were in. So it's really cool to see opportunities like that have opened up.
Yeah, it's such a the whole travel thing. The longer blocks, we've found the same thing. Is it's like if you're travel, I mean, I feel this way even if it's just me. If I'm going for work, then I will make it as short of a possible trip as I can, and it's like I take a carry on and I take red eye and come back this sometimes like same day or two. But when it's with the family, it just makes so much more sense to be there for a bigger chunk of time and be able to actually really get settled in, because if you go for a week, a day on each end is the travel day and like getting settled in and all of that. So it really is so much more relaxing to do it in bigger chunks, and what allows you to do that is real estate in your business, and that's kind of where I think I've talking to people on the podcast just in network in the real estate world and entrepreneur world. It's like that's really what it's about is that time freedom. Ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
it's great to make money. It's great to make more money as your businesses grow. Like that stuff's all cool, but ultimately, it's really about this. It's about being able to travel full time or take, like, my big thing now is I want summers off with the kids. Like I just want to be able to do, I guess, what you're doing full time. I want that option in the summer where it's like when they're off from school, we just do whatever we want, some of that will still be working remotely as you mentioned, but ultimately being able to do whatever we want. And so I think it's just a really cool thing to hear your story and have people understand that, like, this is very achievable. It takes time, it takes work, but it is very achievable to be in the position that you're in. um, and with that, I'll I guess probably transition here to ask you the questions I ask every guest. And the first one is, of course, the name of the show is Know Your Why. And so it's important for me to ask every guest, what is your why? You've had a ton of success already, right? Like what's your why? What motivates you now to continue growing?
Well, Jason, you teed me up for this pretty well with what you just said. And my driving force is creating freedom of time, freedom of finances, freedom of focus, and not just for myself, but for others as well. I really love helping. I've been a teacher, and so I'm passionate about helping people scale their investments and simplify their lives through systems, delegation, and figuring out how to run it like a business. So empowering others to get their freedom and really to achieve what they probably felt was impossible at one time is what truly motivates me.
Yeah, yeah. I think it is. I mean, it's great to see it in your own life, but even as you start to uh, provide opportunities to other people, it's pretty cool to see that you can kind of pass along that success, pass along that just the knowledge that freedom of time is achievable, that it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tell us something about yourself. I feel like you've told us a lot of really cool things. We'll see if there's anything left. But tell us something about yourself that isn't common knowledge, special skill or hobby or something to let the listeners know you better.
Something I really enjoy that not many people know is I love visiting botanical gardens. I mentioned that I had done like a family farm, a hobby farm before, and I love plants. And so I love going to botanical gardens and just seeing the different kinds of plants that grow in different areas. What we also have seen grow in multiple areas. There's some plants like bougainvillea, I swear, has taken over the world. Every warm climate has bougainvillea. It's kind of funny. And but I love going to botanical gardens, and I make that a point when we travel to find and visit the botanical gardens there.
Well, my mom is going to love that answer because she also is just tremendously passionate about botanical gardens and gardening, and so it's been a I'm actually more interested in that now, but I just remember growing up like, yeah, mom, yeah, plants, got it. Like, just there was never my thing, but no, I've definitely come to appreciate it more. And now we live in California, which is it's own ecosystem and just a totally different world when it comes to what's grown here, whether that's I don't know what you call it, plants for viewing or produce that you're eating, but
Yes.
it is a kind of a fascinating, and I'm sure that with your travels you get to see a lot of that around the world, so that's very, very cool. When people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way, Adrian?
The best way is to go to my website, adriennegreen.com. It's my first name, last name, ADRIENNEGREEN, just like the color.com. And what I have there for your listeners is the Freedom Blueprint. And this is the 10 foundational pieces that I found made a huge difference in helping me really organize my portfolio and start running it instead of having it run me. So if they head to adriennegreen.com, they can get the Freedom Blueprint. It's a free download for them to help them identify what they already have in their portfolio and what maybe they could easily add. All these things are easy peasy things to add to get stuff organized so that you are really mastering that portfolio instead of the other way around.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll put that in the show notes so people can find it. Adrian, this has been a blast. I think your story is fascinating and inspirational. I think the fact that you're able to travel full time is it may not be every person's goal to travel full time, but really what it implies is that time freedom and kind of being able to be
Mm-hmm.
where you want with who you want. And I think that's really
Exactly.
what we all want. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for being on the show today. I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And folks listening, make sure you connect with Adrian. You can get that free download. I think that will be very helpful. And please like, rate, and review the show so we can continue to get great guests. And thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?